Now, where were you on the 16th of October 1987? Well, few who lived through it will ever forget it. 30 years ago, the worst storm for 300 years lashed the south, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. 18 people lost their lives. 15 million trees were felled, and winds of up to 115 miles an hour were recorded. The cost of the damage was put at more than £1.4 billion. Now, the storm wasn't expected to come as far as Britain. It formed in the Bay of Biscay. Forecasters didn't think it would get past the Channel. But gales hit northwest Brittany at 11 p.m. that night and Dorset and Hampshire at midnight. By 3 in the morning, the storm was devastating the southeast. Well, this evening we look back at some of the quite remarkable stories of that night. John Ryle's been speaking to people who experienced the storm firsthand.
Born in the Bay of Biscay, the Great Storm of 1987 peaked at hurricane force as it dealt the southeast its most terrifying night since the Blitz. The editor of the Sevenoaks Chronicle had walked home from the pub in a strengthening breeze. He woke 3 hours later and thought Thatcher's Britain was under nuclear attack.
And my wife and I were woken up about 2:30 by what sounded like an express train coming into the bedroom. And there was this roaring noise. It was attacking the house and fading. My first reaction was, God, they've dropped the bomb.
It wasn't a nuclear bomb, it was a weather bomb. And next morning, for as far as he could see, Kent looked like a war zone.
My wife came with me and we kind of crawled and climbed our way into Sevenoaks. I remember every so often scratching the earth to see if there was tarmac, because you just couldn't tell if you were on the road or in the woods. And looking south, I could see a horizon that hadn't existed for, 100 years or so.
He hired a plane to photograph the aftermath, first for his newspaper, then for a book that climbed the charts, launching a highly successful publishing career.
Always one ahead of us, every single week, was Rosemary Conley's hip and thigh diet. But the enormous thrill came with a telephone call from the Book Watch, the people who compile the bestsellers, and they said, "We think next week you'll be #1.
On the night of the Great Storm, Sevenoaks famously became one oak, and 30 years on, the sole surviving tree now stands about twice the size of the 6 replacements. More than 15 million trees were claimed by the Great Storm, and damage was estimated at more than £2 billion, the equivalent now of more than £6 billion. At Hastings, fishermen braved gusts of up to 120 miles an hour to pull their boats up the beach, with tragic consequences for one of them. Jimmy Reed was crushed by the ripped-off roof of a beach hut.
The difficulty was trying to get him to hospital, because you couldn't call for an ambulance because most of the roads were just impossible to get through.
The crew of the Hengist prayed for their lives as the cross-channel ferry broke its moorings at Folkestone. They had to head for the channel or face being smashed against the harbour wall. Mountainous seas dumped the ferry on the beach.
When we started going out through the end of the pier, she just rolled, terrific roll over, and we lost the engines, we lost the bow thrusters, we lost the lights, we lost everything.
When we mustered on the bridge and we said a prayer, I really prayed. I'd just become a father 11 days previously, and I was thinking about my baby daughter, and obviously my wife, and I remember the purser saying to me, you should christen your baby daughter Gail after tonight. But no, it was frightening, it was scary, because it was pitch black. You couldn't see any lights ashore because the national grid had gone down, it had blacked out. We just didn't know where we were.
Britain's most violent storm for more than 200 years claimed 18 lives as it rampaged across southern England. But the man who told the story of the Great Storm says the death toll could have run into thousands had it struck at midday rather than midnight.
I don't think I'd be here talking about it, to be honest. We didn't know about it. Michael Fish famously told us there wouldn't be a hurricane. People were tucked away in their beds. There were a few nasty. There were a few tragedies, but had that happened in the daytime, it would have been awful, absolutely awful.
John Ryle, ITV News, Sevenoaks.
Well, as we've just seen for many people here in the southeast, the Great Storm was the longest and most terrifying night of their lives.
Simon Corby, who was just 22 at the time, was in the hotel in Hastings that was devastated by wind. He's been telling Sarah Saunders his remarkable story of survival.
30 years ago, when these flats were the Queen's Hotel in Hastings, Simon Corby woke up in desperate confusion.
Yeah, when I sort of woke, it was very odd. It felt like I was in a dream, but then reality sort of set in when I did start sort of shouting out my name, room number, to see if people could sort of find me or try and help me.
Above him he could see stars, and his room looked as though a bomb had been detonated there. Lashed by the winds, a vast 4-ton chimney had smashed through the roof, crashing through the floor above him and into his own room before thundering down into the suite below in a terrifying avalanche of rubble and concrete. Simon was trapped, dazed and confused, but astoundingly unhurt.
I had a feeling of a sensation of falling, and then I remember just looking up and seeing a very odd image of what looked like sky with rain and water and noise.
Sadly, retired shopkeeper Ronald Davis, who had been in the room above, was crushed to death by the falling masonry. When you look back on that day, did it take you a while to get over it?
Yeah, months, years. I still think about it now. It will still pop into my mind once a week at least.
There was a time when I just sort of was lying silently, thinking that certainly I might as well just lie here and wait for it to happen. So.
If I ever think about it, you just sort of think you're just incredibly lucky.
And more on the Great Storm here tomorrow night.